At the engagement party, I got locked in the bathroom stall, and guess what greeted me? A bucket of sewage. My fiancé leaned against the door, grinning all the way. Surely, never tasted sewage in your life, huh? How's it feel? Pretty awesome. I laughed even wider than him. But it was even cooler seeing your true love crying on the floor. My fiancé's true love was my half-sister. From the moment Monica got brought into the house, I knew I hated her. I always marveled at how strong family genes were. If I was openly bad, Monica was secretly nasty. To sum up, none of us were any good. She'd drug me the next minute, and I'd be pulling her hair out in no time. From 10 years old to 20, I always had the upper hand. And why? My mom was the legitimate daughter of the richest man in the Booths. Me, the only daughter, was the recognized heir of the Booths. As for Monica, she was just an illegitimate daughter born to an outsider. What did you do to her? Sure enough, Calvin's smile disappeared. I looked at the rare sight of him getting angry and found it hilarious. This was the guy. The one I liked for 14 years. Leaving a nasty stain on the history of my battles with that illegitimate child. I met him first. I was his fiancé. Why did he like Monica and not me? I never thought about such stupid questions. As long as they weren't out of the picture for a day, Calvin would still be mine, even if he were dead. I pushed Calvin away and fixed my hair in the mirror. Casually, I drove her to the mountains and took her phone away. Poor thing didn't even get to attend the engagement party. She should be back the day after tomorrow, but... I turned to Calvin, smiling brightly. If she's unlucky and meets some wild animal, she might not come back at all. Calvin stared deeply at me for 2 seconds. Surely, just you wait. Wait for what? I spread my arms and twirled around in front of him. The sewage spun off my red dress and splashed onto his pant legs. Wait for this harmless bucket of water? Calvin, compared to what Monica and I have been through, your revenge is child's play. He ignored me and walked out quickly without even closing the bathroom door, leaving me to face the guests in my sorry state. I shivered, but straightened my back and walked out with my head held high. Sewage dripped all the way. If anyone stared, I'd politely greet them. Both main characters leaving the engagement party. My drenched, unique appearance should make me a city's biggest joke. But I wasn't worried. I knew Ken wouldn't allow the Booth's reputation to be tarnished. My father, who made his wealth by marrying the richest woman, saw his face more important than life itself. The engagement party, which should have been a farce, became a praised event instead. Not a single photo leaked. As for Monica, Calvin found her in the suburbs and brought her back. She was in a coma with a high fever when sent home, looking pitiful. Ken always turned a blind eye to the fights between Monica and me. He said, if you can't handle child's play, you'll be worse off in the corporate battlefield. As long as no big events happened, our dear father was okay with anything. So for my nasty behavior, Ken just grounded me for 3 days. I met Jesse's murderous gaze. My laughter echoed through the villa. During my 3 days of confinement, Monica's room next door was busy and lively. Monica was more likable, naturally more popular at school. I didn't bother making friends. No matter how big their complaints were, they'd have to step aside when they saw me. It wasn't easy for Monica's friends to visit her. My presence made it a daring adventure. Lying on my couch, bored, I played a ring toss game. The laughter from next door was too loud, so I grabbed a vase and threw it at the wall. They quieted down. Soon, the door opened. I looked up. It was Calvin. He seemed like he wanted to say something but stopped when he saw the game in my hands. Why do you still have that thing? The game was a gift from 7-year-old Calvin. Growing up, my food, clothing, and education cost a fortune. But the only thing missing was playtime. Shirley shed tears out of envy seeing others play games. Funny as it sounds, it was normal in our wealthy family. Calvin was an illegitimate child. Back then, he had just been brought home, living miserably. When he saw me eyeing a toy, he saved up for a year and bought me the game. As a child, he was the kindest to me. But now, all that's changed. I continued playing the game, unbothered. Because I like you. Calvin looked like he heard a joke. Surely, you don't think I'd like someone everyone avoids like the plague, do you? He could only hurt me by not liking me. But I had 1,000 ways to hurt him. I sat up, smiling. Does it matter who you like? Even if you like a deity, you'll marry me right after graduation. Calvin, don't forget, you're just a dog they raised. You're not fit to talk love with me. I knew Calvin too well, better than anyone in the world. His secrets, his flaws, he told me in our childhood. Now, I used the knife he handed me, stabbing it back without mercy. If I was hurt, he had to be too. No one could have it easy. Sure enough, the atmosphere around him dropped like 8 degrees in an instant. Surely, you're disgusting. Disgusting? My eyes felt a bit hot, so I forced a bigger smile. Why? Monica isn't disgusting. You think you're so high and mighty for liking her? In the end, we're all the same. Nobody's better than anyone else. Calvin gave me a cold stare. So you think by playing games out in the open, you'll get anything besides loathing? I almost laughed till I cried. I get the thrill. Watching you all hate me but can't do anything about it, that's the best. Calvin pressed his lips together and turned to leave. He threw a parting line. I really regret that it wasn't me who dumped that bucket of water. I was stunned. It wasn't him? But my gift was already sent out. Calvin won't kill me, right? The day after my house arrest ended, I went to school excitedly while others were in class. I was busy giving someone a shower on the rooftop. A girl was tied to a chair, her lips pale and her hair dripping water. Her eyes were red. Surely, you'll get your comeuppance someday. I looked at the half-empty bucket, tossing aside the ladle. With a lazy tone, I asked, "What did I do to you?" The girl widened her eyes in disbelief. "You're bullying me. Don't you know that?" I shook my head. "How can you just accuse me like that? Ever heard of paying back a drop of gratitude with a fountain?" I raised the bucket and poured the remaining water over her head. Grinning, I said, "I'm just repaying a favor." After learning Calvin didn't dump the water, I had someone check the surveillance footage from the banquet hall. On the footage, a girl followed me into the restroom. That girl was none other than Emily. Before this, I didn't know her. I only knew that there was a freshman named Emily in her first year, known for her looks and grades. Now it all made sense. I didn't know why she wanted to mess with me. And I didn't care. I had enemies from New York to Paris. I wouldn't mind squashing another bug. When Calvin found me, Emily was nearly passed out. If not for the ropes, she'd probably have fallen off the chair. Seeing Emily's miserable state, Calvin's face darkened even more. "Surely, let her go." I sighed. This guy really loved playing the hero rescuing damsel in distress role. Saved me, saved Monica, now he wants to save Emily. Busy guy. I obediently loosened the ropes, letting Emily fall off the chair, lying on the floor like a rag doll. Wiping my hands, I chatted with him cheerfully. "Judging by your expression, you must have received my gift." Calvin took a deep breath. "If your gift means the ashes, then yeah, I got it." I knew Calvin hated his family. Ever since his mom was killed, he dreamed of taking them down. For years, he acted obediently just to gather evidence of their illegal activities, but now, all that evidence had been burned to ashes by me. It's more of personal interest than revenge. I couldn't let Calvin rise up. Once he broke free, the only thing holding us together, our engagement, would be null and void. I looked at Calvin. Apologetic, but only a little. "I thought you dumped the water, so I returned the favor with fire." Fair enough, right? Surely, you know how long it took me. Calvin didn't finish his sentence, probably aware of another person's presence. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unclear. "You went too far this time." I had to admit, his patience was remarkable after all these years. He was clearly furious, yet he kept up his good guy image. Even his words sounded gentle. I shrugged, a bit helpless. Blame yourself for not clarifying earlier. You know how much I hold grudges. Emily, finally coming around, said, surely, justice may be delayed, but it won't be absent. I cut her off with a slap. Who gave you permission to speak? Pitiful hypocrites, always playing the victim while being bullies themselves. She provoked me first, yet now it was all my fault. In this light, my half-sister seemed much nicer. Though dumb and mean, at least she didn't pretend. I saw Calvin preparing to leave. I kicked the dazed Emily by my feet and called out to him. Aren't you taking her? Calvin fiddled with his phone and chuckled. She's Bob's girl. I've already texted him, he'll be here soon. Bob was one of Calvin's friends and the only one in City A who could rival Monica's family. And like me, he would do anything to achieve his goals, no matter the cost. We had an unspoken truce, ruling different parts of the city. Especially after he went abroad, City A was mine to dominate. Calvin suddenly smiled. Surely, guess what Bob's gonna do to you for messing with his girl? I raised an eyebrow. He's back already? I had to. Couldn't let City A fall into someone else's hands now, could I? I looked towards the source of the voice. Bob was leaning against the rooftop door, eyes narrowed in that characteristic sly smile. His smile was gentle. Surely, wanna play? I smiled back. How do you wanna play? Emily saw Bob, struggled to get up, and threw herself into his arms with a strong fishy stench. Bob caught Emily and slightly frowned, but his lips still held a smile. He glanced at me, keeping his composed demeanor. How was the death race? I noticed Bob's subtle disdain and couldn't help but laugh. Bob asked, not happy with the game? I shook my head. I like the game, but if you want to kill me, there's no need to waste such lousy acting. I looked at Emily in Bob's arms. That stupid woman probably doesn't know she's just a pawn Bob used to justify his actions. The death race, as the name suggests, is a deadly game. Two cars face each other, and you step on the gas hard. Whoever dodges first loses. Bob doesn't like Emily enough to risk his life over her. The only reason must be the piece of land up for auction in the city. Monica's family is Bob's biggest competitor. My car is parked below. Bob has plenty of opportunities to mess with it. If the heir to Monica's family has an accident and their stock price drops, Bob could easily win the bid. After hearing my thoughts, Bob laughed knowingly. So, do you dare to play? Absolutely. We decided to play the game on a coastal road under construction. Calvin had something to take care of and spoke to Bob in a low voice before leaving. Bob sent Emily to the hospital. Although Emily was reluctant, she obediently went and gave me a fierce glare before leaving. I just smiled. Emily better pray I die at Bob's hands today, or else I'll make her wish she were dead. Before setting off, I had my men check the car. Bob noticed my caution and smiled ambiguously. If you're worried, I don't mind giving you a ride in a fancy car. If something happens, at least you'd have company when you die. Your corpse isn't worthy to lie next to me. I mocked him, got in my car, and started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Bob take off his jacket and casually throw it into the trash can. The thought of Emily's pain when she finds out the truth made me very happy. I stepped on the gas pedal with more enthusiasm. Bob got in his car and accelerated, soon overtaking me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and overtook him from the side. We raced neck and neck all the way to the agreed-upon place. Bob got out of his car, with wicked amusement in his eyes. Since it's a game, there should be a bet. Ladies first, what's your bet? I walked over to Bob, raising a hand. My fingertips slid along the car's lines. I smiled and said, nice car. Bob stared at my fingers, his eyes darkening a bit. You want this? I hummed a bit in response, my fingertips sliding from the car to Bob's chest. And you? That piece of land in the city? That was the initial plan. Bob smiled, watching me take the bomb remote out of his chest pocket. But I've changed my mind. I want you. Quite an appetite. I took the remote, gently patting Bob's face. Beat me first. Bob replied, I think I'll surely lose. I can't bear to see you die. I slightly raised an eyebrow, turned around, and got in the car. There's a kind of telepathy between crazies. Just one look and you can feel the resonance of dark souls. I couldn't bear to see Bob die either. It's rare to find such a fun toy, can't break it easily. I looked at Bob on the other side of the road. He was sitting in his car, one hand resting on the window, supporting his head. He silently counted down with his lips, 3, 2, 1. As the signal beeped, a few words appeared on the car's display screen, asylum. Answering my phone, I kept my foot on the gas pedal. Busy now. The voice on the other end interrupted me. Jesse committed suicide. My mind went blank. When I snapped back to reality, Bob's car was already in front of me. Pursed my lips, put the car in reverse, and turned it around, ending the game. On the way, I never let off the gas. I must have run many red lights, but I didn't care. Or maybe, even if I killed 10,000 people, I just wanted to see her before she died. However, when I arrived at the asylum, all I saw was a white sheet. Miss Shirley, I'm sorry. The emergency doctor looked apologetic. Ignoring the doctor, I walked to the bed and lifted the sheet. It was a face strikingly similar to mine. It should have been beautiful, enchanting, stunning. But now, it looked old and decayed, like twilight. Knowing she didn't want to live, why didn't you watch her closely? My voice was dry and hoarse. We checked the room every day, but she hid the sleeping pills in the unicorn doll, that doll. The caregiver beside me explained softly, stopping midway. Everyone knew the reason. She didn't let anyone touch that doll, including me, its original owner. If anyone tried to take the doll from her, she would go mad, banging and screaming. I don't share. I don't share. The medical staff had quietly left the room at some point, thoughtfully closing the door behind them. I raised my hand and gently stroked the woman's face. Stiff, cold. I whispered, Mom, are you punishing me? Jessie was a good mother, but only for ordinary people. For someone like me, who had to fight for fame and fortune since childhood, her loving education would only lead to my downfall. That unicorn doll was a gift from her. In kindergarten, a little girl wanted my doll. I directly broke her nose. When I got home, Jessie taught me, Shirley, everyone loves beautiful things. You must learn to share. I nodded, somewhat understanding. Later, Jessie found out Ken had another woman outside, even a child about my age. She stopped looking at me, lying in bed every day, crying and laughing, humming an out-of-tune song. That tune was one Ken used to play for her. One day, I finally pushed the door open and went in. With a childlike face, I smiled and said, Mom, a lot of people like Dad too. You need to learn to share. I still remember the look in her eyes. From confusion, to despair, and finally madness. See, nobody wants to share something they hold dear. I calmly packed up Jessie's belongings. The closet in her room was full of expensive, beautiful dresses, all sent by Grandpa's people. I found it laughable. Even if someone's heart is empty, eating meals made of gold every day still leaves them impoverished. After packing everything up, my eyes landed on the old, dirty unicorn doll by the bed. The pills were hidden one by one, year after year, inside the small opening. But to take them out, you'd have to rip the doll open. Trash isn't worth keeping. I was merely returning the lesson you taught me. I did nothing wrong, no one can punish me. I grabbed the unicorn doll and threw it through the iron bars of the window. I drove straight back to the villa. When I entered, Ken was sitting on the couch, looking over company documents. Carrying the box full of Jessie's clothes, I walked over to her. Ken glanced up at me and said, Back already? Your running of red lights has been caught on camera. Jessie killed herself. Ken didn't even raise his head, there are about 20 violations. Do you know how much the stock price would drop if this got out? I said, my mom died. Ken flipped another page of his documents. I've already had it taken care of. Be more careful next time. Someone once said I was a heartless devil. But in that moment, I felt my heart being slowly torn apart, piece by piece. Something inside me, strained for so long, suddenly snapped. I opened the box and threw it at Ken. The colorful dresses fluttered through the air. Some landed on Ken's meticulously neat iron gray suit. Ridiculous, laughable. Just like this home. I finally couldn't hold back anymore and started laughing. Laughing until tears streamed down my face. Ken punished me for my rudeness. This time, he locked me in that small, dark confinement room. Every time I failed to meet his expectations, I ended up here. Actually, I wasn't punished often. Because my grades were good enough, and I was ruthless enough. But still, I hated this place. In the darkness, I lost track of the days. I only remembered the countless different meals passed through the small window. I wasn't foolish enough to be like those characters on TV, staging a hunger strike in protest. I wanted to live, beautifully and powerfully. I ate every bite, putting in the effort. Then I'd have the strength to deprive those I hated of their food. On the last day of my confinement, Monica brought me my meal. I ate slowly as she sat beside me, resting her chin on her hands. Do you know why Dad is so cruel to you? My mom said she had Jesse raped. Guess whose child you are? Seeing me silent, Monica thought she had one. She grew even more arrogant. Hurry up and eat. Today is the CFA exam. Your license was revoked, so Dad told me to take you there. Oh, and take a bath first. Don't dirty my new car. I had prepared for this exam for a long time. I couldn't afford to miss it. So, I casually poured the hot soup on her face. Looks like you need a bath too. Monica screamed, holding her face. She wanted to call a doctor but was scared of being punished for not completing Ken's task. So, she ran back to her room to splash some cold water. When we both showed up at the test center, all polished and clean, the exam was about to start. Seeing the scene before me blur, I shook my head. Monica, aren't you bored? All these years and still only one trick? Monica blinked and smiled innocently. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Oh, good luck with the exam. If you can't pass this certification, I'm afraid you'll be back in the confinement room. I absolutely would not return to that place. Trying to stay awake, I sneered. Save that talk for yourself. You can't even pass level 2, loser. When I walked out of the test center, I could barely even walk straight. In a daze, I saw Bob standing not far away, leaning against his car. He smiled and waved. Long time no see. I bit my lip to maintain my composure and walked up to him. Smiling, I said, if I remember correctly, you had already stopped before I turned around that day. That's right. Bob's gaze fell on my red dress, his smile deepening. If that's the case, get out of the way. Don't hinder me from driving my new car. I raised my hand to push Bob, but he pinned me against the car door. He pressed close, his hand slowly moving down. I furrowed my brow. Don't be foolish. His breath brushed my ear with a predatory air. The only thing you need to control is me. The wound on my leg was covered by a layer of thin stockings, and his warm palm covered it. He withdrew his hand, rubbing the blood on my lips. Red lips suit you best as always. To stay awake before the exam, I had used an art knife to cut a deep gash on my leg. The wound was hidden beneath my skirt, blood seeping through the black stockings. I thought no one would notice. I heard you're ruthless to others, but I didn't expect you'd be so hard on yourself too. I ignored him. Wiping the blood off my lips with the back of my hand, I rummaged through my bag for lipstick. Using his car window as a mirror, I outlined my lips. Your dear sister drugged me. She always resorts to such petty tricks. I couldn't help but agree, indeed. Seeing my response, Bob's handsome face breaks into a smile. I'm going to scratch her face, how about that? I put the lipstick back in my bag and pressed my lips together. No need, I'll do it myself, I said with a smile. He smiled back, then offered to drive me. I was happy to have a free driver, so I didn't refuse. Once in the car, I gave an address and was about to rest my eyes when I heard him say, "We need to go to the hospital first." I have something to take care of, we have to go to the hospital first. Annoyed, you're noisy. We need to go to the hospital first. I opened my eyes, raised my hand, and tried to open the car door. Bob quickly locked it and pulled over. Fine, we'll take care of things first, but we need to bandage your leg. With that, he took out the first aid kit from the car, grabbed my leg, and placed it on his lap without waiting for me to resist. I had to twist my body to face him. I felt his fingers moving on my leg, sending a shiver down my spine. Frowning, I said, "Bob, you're crossing the line." He pressed harder. I felt the pain and punched his shoulder. "Let go." He didn't release me, his voice turned cold. "Thinking about scars on such pretty legs makes me want to kill your sister. This is my leg. Why are you so worked up?" I shot back. "Didn't I tell you? I want you." I pulled my leg back and smiled, uninterested. I wanted to remind him that he lost our bet. Changing my mind, I said, "If you pass my test, I'll consider it. I have too many people to deal with right now," I said. Bob laughed. "You want me to take care of Emily?" I laughed too. I had to admit, Bob knew exactly how to get to me. After finishing our business, Bob dropped me home. I grabbed a fruit knife and started looking for someone, only to find that Monica and her mother were gone. A servant told me that Ken went abroad for business, and Monica insisted on tagging along. So, the whole family left. Monica thought knowing I wasn't Ken's biological child would give her leverage. She ended up drugging me, then got scared I'd take revenge and fled to safety. I put down the knife and smiled silently. Little did she know, what she thought was the truth was actually a gift for me. During meals, she mocked me for not understanding Ken, thinking my silence was a sign of defeat. She didn't realize how much effort it took to suppress my laughter. I might not understand Ken, but I know Jesse too well. If I wasn't Ken's biological child, I wouldn't even be alive. I wondered how Ken would react upon learning everything. But to completely bring Ken down, I needed a crucial step. Ken wouldn't have been so powerful in a city without my mother's family support. I drove to my grandfather's house. Faced with Henry, I greeted him with a smile. "Grandpa. You didn't even come to your mother's funeral, why are you here now?" Henry sipped his hot tea nonchalantly. No wonder he didn't like me. I hadn't seen much of him growing up, and I was the last straw that drove his daughter mad. Now that Jessie had died in a mental institution, he spared me from joining her in the grave. But I still wore a smile. "Dad locked me up, but as soon as I was free, I rushed to see you. Don't think I don't know your schemes. I don't care about your family's mess." I gracefully poured more tea for the old man. "Mom died so disgracefully, and now Dad's taking his mistress and her daughter on a vacation abroad. Can you really swallow that?" Grandpa smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Surely, I know Ken went abroad for business, stop adding fuel. I am Jesse's father, but I'm also a businessman. I already lost a daughter, I can't lose a business too, given the booth's current strength." I got impatient and interrupted. "What if I said I could replace Dad?" Over the years, besides studying and toying with Monica, I spent most of my time helping manage the company and attending banquets. All to one day take over the company. But now, I wanted to expedite that process. Grandpa paused for a moment, then sighed. "You're nothing like Jessie, you're clever, ruthless, ambitious. If Jessie was like you, maybe she wouldn't have died. But I'm halfway to the grave, why would I take such a risk with you?" I downed the freshly poured tea. "Whether you want to or not, you'll have to take this risk." A few days later, when Ken returned home with Monica and her mother, I had been waiting in the living room for a while. Ken acted like nothing happened. I checked my CFA results. "There's room for improvement." "I'll keep working hard," I smiled and handed him a document. Here's something for you to look at. After the test, I used Ken's hair to visit his most trusted doctor. That doctor had an affair with Monica's mom. When I was born, they made a fake paternity test. I took the utility knife that cut my thigh and demanded a new, accurate test. Ken looked at the document, his hands shaking as he called the doctor. I had already sent someone to monitor the doctor. He couldn't lie and had to tell the truth. I watched Ken's face lose color and kindly offered, if you still don't believe it, you can test at any hospital in a city. Ken's voice trembled, so, you're my child, Jessie didn't betray me. Not only did she not betray you, but the lover you believed in was actually a rapist hired by that viper. I looked into Ken's anguished eyes, one was afraid to speak, the other afraid to ask, you really are a match made in heaven. Ken, who used to control everything, had been kept in the dark for 20 years. It's laughable. Regrets? Too late. Jessie is already dead. Save your repentance for hell. Everyone standing here today is a murderer. Including myself. Ken, trembling, tried to reach for me. I shoved him away. Oh, and I have a gift for you. I threw the board's dismissal letter, led by the old man, at Ken. Now, I'm in charge of the corporation. My dear father, thank you for your relentless teachings over the years. Is your daughter good enough now? Do I meet your expectations? Ken was speechless, his eyes blank and unfocused, as if he'd aged in an instant. I ignored him and grabbed the stunned Monica. I pinned her to the ground. Taking out a fruit knife, I slowly and deeply slashed her face. This is payback for drugging me before the exams. The blade was so sharp that Monica didn't even feel it until the blood started seeping out. She screamed, covering her face, and rushed to her mom. But her mom was already in a panic. She sat on the ground, confused about why things had turned out this way. Muttering repeatedly, I should have killed this scourge long ago, should have killed her. The joy I had anticipated never arrived. I only felt an unprecedented irritation and emptiness. I waved for the people standing by to take her away. Those were Dad's people. Dealing with them was part of my deal with him. Dad had been untouchable in both legal and illegal circles for so long. His hands were clean. From now on, whether these relatives of mine live, die, become crippled, or go insane, they won't be in my way anymore. And I have to thank Calvin for it. Some of the evidence he collected threatened to ruin a century-old family business. Thinking of Calvin softened my expression a bit. I burned his copy of the evidence but kept a backup for myself. If he finds out, he'd probably be furious. I lifted my head, slowly taking in the mess and silence of this home. Without a second thought, I walked out. Now, just one final step remains. This last step won't be easy. As night deepened, I drove aimlessly through the streets. The car behind me kept honking. I pulled out the gun from my car. Stopped, got out, and walked to the driver's window. He rolled it down, about to curse. I pointed the gun at his forehead. No hesitation. Pulled the trigger and said, boom. He wet his pants in fear. I couldn't help but laugh. Go home and change your pants. I tossed the toy gun into his car and got back into mine. That's when I saw multiple missed calls on my phone. All from Calvin. If I won't go to him, he'll come to me. I took out a cigarette, lit it, and called him back. The call connected immediately. I know you're there, Shirley. Where are you? He asked. I stared at the blue and yellow flickering flame, lost in thought before responding. Oh, come to avenge Monica? Calvin paused for a moment after hearing my muffled voice. Want to grab a drink? He asked. I smiled. Since he insists on joining me, why hesitate? At the Moonlight Bar, the waiter smoothly led me to a private room. I opened the door, and amidst the loud electronic music, I heard Bob's voice. Didn't you and Shirley used to be close? What happened? Standing by the door, I heard Calvin reply. I felt sorry for her because of her crazy mom. But then I realized she was crazy too. Look what happened to her family now. Bob's lips curled into a smile. If earlier I was confused, now I was filled with rage. I kicked the door open and stormed inside. Grabbed a bottle of red wine and smashed it by the table. I leaned down, aiming the jagged edge at Calvin's neck. Calvin, I'm warning you. Hate me or love me, but never pity me. Before I could stab him, Calvin grabbed my wrist. He pulled my hand away from his neck and looked at me. For a moment, I saw the boy who once saved up to buy me a gaming console. Shirley, calm down. I know you're upset. Wait for me. Once I take down that family, I'll take you away. And Monica? Don't you love her? Silence was his answer in that instant. It all clicked for me. Looking at his familiar face, I realized how foreign he felt. He never loved anyone. He thrived on manipulating emotions, watching us fight over him. It all fed his pathetic ego. I should have seen it long ago. A flower blooming in darkness can't be truly pure. He shouldn't have tainted the last bit of purity in my heart. Feeling drained, I dropped the bottle. Shards scattered on the floor. A voice came from my mouth. Calvin, want to go for a ride? Bob, lounging on the sofa, had been watching our drama unfold. Hearing this, he finally spoke. You're driving the car I tampered with, aren't you? I shot Bob a cold look. Sometimes, knowing too much isn't good. He nonchalantly sipped his drink and turned to Calvin. I suggest you don't go. Her car's wired with explosives. The remote's in her hand. Calvin stared at me, searching my eyes for the truth. I didn't answer his unspoken question, only repeated, I'm asking you again, want to go for a ride? Calvin neither said yes nor no, just stared at me, like he was searching for something. A wave of irritation surged within me. What else was there to find? The version of me and him from back then no longer exists. I stood up, ready to leave, but Bob blocked my way, eyes twinkling with a smile. So heartless, aren't you? There's still one person here. Aren't you going to ask me? I sneered and walked past him. I would never believe Bob's playful antics. We were just amusing toys for each other. No need to pretend. Bob followed me, his tone surprisingly had a hint of pleading. Shirley, ask me. I shot him an impatient glance. So, do you dare? What a waste of time. How could someone like him, who's always after his own gain, ever dare? I'll accompany you to the end. He answered with a smile, not hesitating at all. My heart skipped a beat. Those were the exact words I had said to him years ago. I sped down the coastal highway. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Calvin's car right behind. The car's display screen kept showing his incoming calls. Neither Bob nor I paid any attention. Bob, sitting in the passenger seat, smiled. So, knowing that Calvin only treated you well out of pity, do you still like him? I snorted, don't think I don't know you made him say those things on purpose. Early or late, he asks right when I'm at the door. What a perfect scheme. Bob wasn't embarrassed at all, so what? He never deserved your affection anyway. Then who does? Bob suddenly leaned close to my ear, his hand lightly brushing my back. Naturally, it's me. His husky voice was like an opiate. We're the same, both bad, both mad, and both brave. I felt something uncontrollable stirring within. Bob kept on talking. He spoke of how he manipulated Emily's feelings, how he drugged her and threw her into the underworld. He said Emily seemed destroyed, unable to take care of herself now. I listened quietly, without a trace of sympathy. His words were filled with mockery. If she hadn't recklessly gone against me, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Bob nodded in agreement. I forgot to tell you. It was me who sent her to splash that bucket of water at the engagement party. I suddenly burst out laughing. So, you really just wanted that piece of land from the start? Yes. Unfortunately, the paparazzi you arranged were taken care of by Ken. Bob sneered, a useless piece of trash, if not dead by your father's hands, then mine. He suddenly leaned closer, as if sharing a secret. Warm breath brushed my ear. But I fell in love with you earlier than you think. Do you know? When you said you'd dig out my eyes if I kept staring, you looked stunning. A strange satisfaction echoed in my chest. I almost wanted to laugh. I once thought dragging you to die with me would be unfair to you, now it seems you deserve it. Bob played with the remote control in his hands. So, did I pass the test? Is my dead body worthy to lie beside you now? I reached for my empty pocket. When did you take it? Around the time we talked about being the same kind. Bob tried to say something else but was interrupted by the incessant ringing. He answered the call. From the other end came Calvin's anxious voice. Shirley, don't do anything stupid. I chuckled softly. Calvin, I swore to avenge my mother's death on everyone responsible. And those people include me. I ended the call. And cut off every last thread between Calvin and me, which had always been filled with lies. Once, I believed he was the only one who truly cared for me. Later, I realized the only person who truly cared for me has died in that prison where even the cell windows were padded with cloth. I miss her so much. In the quiet car, I heard Bob ask, "Are you ready?" I looked at the horizon's breaking dawn. Like a light that could vanish at any moment in the night. Muddied, yet bright. I nodded with a smile. As he pressed the button, we both said in unison, boom. The world burst into a colorful spectacle, like fireworks, an end to this grand performance. Or maybe, it's the prologue to a new story. Who could say? The world's murky, where love and sin sing together. Epilogue, a little girl hugged her doll, blinking big eyes, and asked, then what? Then of course, the bad guys all die. She shook her head, confused. Why do bad guys have to die? What really makes someone good or bad? I was caught off guard by her question. Answering awkwardly, those who follow the law, work hard, and are kind and sincere are the good ones. But if everyone dies in the end, does that mean everyone's bad? I patted her furry little head and tucked her into bed. Kids shouldn't have so many questions. Go to sleep. She squirmed back out. Mom, I don't want them to die. Can't the bomb be a toy too? In the dim light, I looked at the unicorn doll on the bedside table. It had been through wind and rain, dirty and worn, its belly covered in stitching scars, but no one knew if the stuffing inside was black or white or what shape it was. I chuckled, gently tapping the girl's forehead. Susan, if you don't go to sleep, I'll call Daddy over, okay?